Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha.
So equalizing, exchanging oneself for others, and it's always just really important to remember is we're going to suffer a lot less if we stop being so self-centered and kind of understand how we actually exist in the world. And a we-centered world, an interdependent experience. And so just, quick recap here. There's no difference between myself and others. None of us wishes for even the slightest of sufferings or is ever content with the happiness we have. Realizing this, I seek your blessings that I may generate joy for the happiness of others. And so last week we tapped into that a little bit in the opening introduction here. And I just want to do it again. So there we are. This meditation involves contemplating that all things, oneself and everyone else, have the same natural, spontaneous wish to enjoy happiness and avoid suffering. We encountered this idea earlier in the meditation on equanimity. The emphasis there was to overcome attachment, aversion, and indifference, respectively, for the three types of people: friends, enemies, and strangers, and cultivate equal concern for them. And friends, enemies, and strangers, people we like, people we don't like so much. And everybody else kind of in between that, the neutral. This equanimity is an essential basis for developing universal love and compassion. Here, the emphasis is on recognizing that everyone is basically just like me, in wanting to be happy and not be miserable. With this awareness, we can easily understand that to regard ourselves as more important than others is unreasonable. Included here are two versions of the meditation: a brief, simple one that you can use when you have limited time to meditate, and a more extensive one with 9 points that you can use when you have time to go in more depth. So we're really good at the 9-point meditation. So you got list of 3, and then there's 3 sub-points. Get 9. You gotta work your way through them. And so last week then I remember just touching on this idea of just like me. But even before we begin, if we don't start at a basis of, is it true that everyone is just like me? Is it true that everyone wants happiness, wants to avoid suffering? Is that fundamentally true? I mean, it's a baseline hypothesis here. But in our heart, we see people doing harm. We see people inflicting harm on themselves. And sometimes we'll just say, that person doesn't want to be happy. Or, they like to be miserable. Or I like to be miserable. And so then, is every being primarily focused on this motivation? If we can really accept that, then we have a basis to work with. So we even go into animals, seeking pleasure over pain. And may notice that they like the nice warm spot in the house. I'm sorry, I'm getting all these little notifications. I'm going to put the mute on there for a minute. And then people that we meet, are they fundamentally motivated in that way? And then we look at ourselves. How much of your motivation about anything is directly tied to wanting to be happy, having pleasure, wanting to avoid suffering? And then we kind of look, are we ever motivated by anything else? even in our concern for others, gets noted. I know Kurt's brought it up a few times, and sometimes we want people to stop suffering so we don't have to suffer seeing them suffer, you know? And often raising kids, there's times where allowing them to have some pain, to have some accountability. It's hard for a parent, you know, and to have them work through situations. But even that can be, I don't want the discomfort of seeing my child be uncomfortable or being insecure. Sometimes it's a good thing to step in. Sometimes kind of just need to let them work with that a little bit. And that again is our motivation, happiness, trying to avoid discontent, suffering. But if we can get to a place where, is there anyone? Have I ever met anyone that isn't trying to find happiness? Trying to avoid suffering. And then everything else is an elaboration of how do I get to feel better and how do I avoid pain? And then we get caught up in what do I need and how do people treat me and what would be nice to have. And I get offended and I get complimented. We keep coming back to this is this core. And that's where I think the guided meditation on Just Like Me will really tap into that. And let's take a look at what is offered in the book first, and we'll unpack that. It's always important, though, to investigate from our own side. So in this meditation, the invitation is to start by going into your heart and getting in touch with your own wish to be happy and to not suffer. This is like a little voice deep inside that says, I just want to be happy and I don't want anything bad to happen to me. This wish motivates us. I'm sorry, I'm putting my own words in there. I do that on occasion. This wish motivates most of your actions and choices, such as what you eat and drink, where you go, who you spend your time with, and so on. It's natural, it's instinctive. Even animals have it. And there's nothing wrong with feeling this way. Matter of fact, if we're not feeling this way, we might need to seek some therapy. It's good to feel good. It's good to avoid pain. It's reasonable. According to Buddhism, we all deserve to be happy and no one should have to suffer. It's only because of our delusions and karma that we have pain and problems instead of happiness. So the point being there is that's an unnatural state, really. It's not fundamentally who we are. If we didn't have those, we'd be that innate, genuine happiness already there. The whole point of Dharma practice is to eliminate the causes of suffering and create causes of genuine, lasting happiness. So do not be afraid to acknowledge your wish to be happy. Accept that you are worthy of happiness. Then bring to mind various people and beings one at a time and reflect that each of them, just like you, wants to be happy and does not want to suffer. You could start with those you're closest to and then gradually widen the circle to include neighbors, other people in your community, town or country, state or province, and so on, depending on how much time and energy you have. Could be a while if you go through the whole universe. It's a lot of people, 9 billion just on this planet. Alternately, you could start with people you knew early in life and then gradually move forward in time, your parents and siblings, playmates, teachers, and classmates, people you worked with, and so on. As above, focus on one person at a time. Reflect, this person is basically just like me. They want to be happy and to not have even the slightest problem or pain. Feel free to experiment and find a way of doing the meditation that works best for you. spend as much time as you wish contemplating this in a formal meditation, bring it into your daily life, reflecting on it with respect to the people you see and interact with. Okay. So that's one method. And it's nice to see the similarities. So a method that I find really helpful is starting with these verses, just like me, all others want happiness. You start with it, just like me, all others. And then the question becomes, what have I done to be happy? What have I done that's healthy to be happy? What are some of the good things I've done to be happy? And then I kind of reflect on some of the healthy things I've done and remembering that the cause of happiness is virtue. So what are the virtuous activities, healthy things I've done to be happy? And then the next question is, what have I done that's harmful to be happy? So I'm trying to be happy, but I've done some things that, maybe I've lied to someone so I could get out of doing something to be happy. Maybe I've taken something so I could be happy. What are some of the behaviors that I've engaged in? But my motivation was to be happy. And maybe skipped work or school or lied or, lots of things that I could have done. Maybe, yeah. So we kind of reflect on, I've done some pretty healthy, virtuous things. I've also done some harmful things to be happy, but that was my motivation. Then we bring to mind a friend of ours, and we just kind of think, they want to be happy just like me. What do I know about them that they've done that's virtuous, it's good, that is healthy to be happy? Again, motivated by happiness. And we might start noticing that they've done some of the same things I've done. Maybe they volunteered and I know about that and I volunteered, or, they've, watched their neighbors' kids and, I've done that. And just kind of start noticing, wow, they've done similar things, been trying to be happy. And then what have they done that I know about that's kind of been harmful or pretty unhealthy? But the motivation was to be happy, right? To be happy. If they maybe, uh, you know, took a day off work when they were supposed to, or whatever we do. And I've done a lot worse than that. I'm trying to be, you know. And so, what have they done? And then we may notice that they've done similar things than I have to be happy. They were pretty unhealthy or harmful or kind of selfish, self-centered. I start to recognize, yeah, my friend's a lot like me. We want to be happy. We do certain things that are healthy and certain things that are not. And then we bring to mind someone we don't like, and they go, now, they want to be happy like me. And what do they do to be happy? And, we may know of some things that were good to be healthy, maybe take their kids on a vacation or, do certain things similar. And you go, they do similar things like I do to be happy. And then what have they done with their motivation to be happy that is harmful or unhealthy? And are there any of the things that I've done? You get where we're going here? We start to notice that just like me, all others in the motivation of trying to be happy, do some things that are pretty good and also do some things that are pretty selfish and self-centered, sometimes harmful. And what happens is we start to recognize the value, the shared ground that all of us as humans have. And sometimes we do different things. But the motivation to be happy, and then we might bring in, is this really creating happiness? Am I engaged in activities to be happy that undermine my happiness, that I don't feel good about the next day? And so it's happening in this process. We start developing a greater awareness of our own process of whether or not I'm engaged in activities that cultivate genuine happiness. Am I engaged in virtue? Am I doing things I feel good about that I'll feel good about tomorrow? Or do I engage with the purpose of being happy into some kind of selfish things that might bring a temporary pleasure, but I don't feel so good about the next day? And then our friends, and then people in it like, and we also want to include strangers, neutral people. Just kind of think about what do they do? There's a guy I see at the city market all the time. I don't know much about him, but he's always, helping out in the area where you check out. And you just wonder what he does to be happy. What's he like? And pretty sure he wants to be happy. Pretty sure he wants to avoid suffering. Works hard. And then, since I don't really know, I just kind of imagine what they might do. They might be a lot like me, probably care about their kids, probably works hard, probably has, activities similar. And what happens is we start gaining an interest in the people that we don't normally see very well. We start having a connection to people we don't otherwise. That's how I got to know my mailman. Name's Jeff. Then his practice, got to think about Jeff a lot. Made up all kinds of stories about Jeff. Then you talk to him and he tells you the real story is. So, people start becoming real to us. And then we bring to our mind to the next verse. Just like me, all others want to avoid suffering. And then we start to recognize, what have I learned to do that avoids suffering? What have I learned to do um, that's healthy and wise? And then I go to the same pattern, right? What have I done that's unhealthy? I didn't want to suffer, so I have these coping behaviors or things that I revert to avoid suffering. And then we go to the person we like, person we don't like, neutral person. And so in this pattern, it's a really profound practice. We did a retreat on it once, and the whole, we just kept building up on it. By the end, 3 days later of bringing this, you'd be amazed what happened to people um, and how many relationships they made amends to and got back reconnected to people that you kind of what was the Kurt's word? They were dead to me. Yeah, that's right. Uh, Suddenly weren't so dead to me anymore, and we can engage. And it was, yeah, really quite meaningful. So I will put that meditation on the community. I mentioned if I remembered, I would. So this time I'm making a commitment. I'll post it on the community. And then so here's the verses. Just like me, all others want happiness. Just like me, all others are trying to avoid suffering. Just like me, all others have known hardship, sadness, and despair. And you start thinking about that. Wow, we've known hardship, we've known grief, we know loss, we know pain. Is there anyone you've ever met that hasn't experienced hardship, pain, loss, struggle? And a lot of people are in some pretty bad conditions for that. And so, just like me, all others have known hardship, sadness, despair, struggles. Just like me, all others are trying to get their needs met. And some of our needs are more perceived than actual. And we kind of investigate how do I get my needs met? And are they my real needs? And we work our way through, same pattern. And the last one is just like me, all others are learning how to live. So thinking, think about our life lessons. And the irony of our life lessons is most of them arise out of poor choices. Yeah. There's a Will Rogers quote. We were reflecting on it yesterday. Good judgment comes from experience. A lot of experience comes from poor judgment. So basically, I had to mess up a lot to get the experience, to learn a lot. And so we can sit there and go, okay, just like me, all others are learning how to live. I start to recognize, I've made poor choices. I've had experience that has given me better wisdom, and so is everyone else. And here's the key with that last one. It's so easy to forget. That's so hard sometimes to grasp. When we know someone, especially with someone we don't like, or they're like this, we become convinced they're like this or this kind of person. And we forget that everyone we meet is changing all the time, including us. And everyone we meet has a capacity for significant change. How they are today and how they might be in 5 years could be radically different. I just got back from a retreat with 120 men and in a recovery. Every year we do a recovery retreat, and these are men who are in recovery from addictions. A lot of them spent many years in prison, and very violent backgrounds. And I'm in recovery myself, 41 years, and I've done a lot of harmful things, and these are people you would at one point meet them and don't want to be alone with. And who they are today, oh, they greet you with a hug, say things like, I love you. They cry and they talk about learn how to be better grandparents and husbands. And they're very different. But if we met them before, they're like this, they're a scary person. Now you want to have them watch your kids. So we forget that how someone is in a moment is how someone is in that moment. But they all have a potential that we don't know about. Doesn't mean they'll get in this positive direction. They might get worse in a more negative direction. But the point is, we'll never know. But we will know that who they are and how we're experiencing them in a moment is because of everything they've gone through. And so when people are really struggling, we know that they've gone through a lot. And we've been maybe a little more fortunate. So as we engage in this practice, I've found that method. So it's just like me, all others are seeking happiness. Just like me, all others are trying to avoid suffering. Just like me, all others have known hardship, sadness, despair. Just like me, all others are trying to get their needs met. Just like me, all others are learning how to live. And then the last piece, just like me, all others deserve compassion. And there's just a very rich transformative experience when we go through that. And it's a nice practice to do daily. So that's the invitation there is to engage in this practice, to learn more about ourselves, to recognize how similar we are to others. And sometimes our outer activities are very different, but the inner motivation very much the same. Someone's feeling of humiliation over something pretty minor to us is the same feeling of humiliation over something pretty big to us that we feel humiliated. The feeling's the same. The humiliation feeling's the same, even though the actions may look very different. And so what happens in this process, we become very clear about the fundamental issues as a human in our desire to be happy and some of the poor choices we make in the process. And how we can adopt a much more connected understanding of others and a real wish for their happiness as well as they find their way. So I'm just going to pause there, see if anyone has any thoughts, questions I need to unmute the computer because I had to mute that. So if you were trying to talk, I wouldn't have heard you. But everybody gets the basic principle. All right. Okay, that's good. Nobody's. Actually, it's not so good. Because that means we're going to go all the way into the 9 point. Okay, Larry's going to save you. Hey, Larry.
Hi. Way back at the beginning, there was a line in that paragraph that says, none of us is ever content with the happiness we have. And I've been kind of letting that run around in my head since you read it. And I thought, well, it feels like I've been happy a lot. So why would he say that?
Yeah, somebody picked up on that. When we look a little more clearly, you'll notice that you'll have that happiness for a moment, but then you get some other news, and then maybe you're not happy in a moment. And, do you still experience any stress, any worry? Do we ever get frustrated? You kind of notice that, well, other emotions come in pretty quick. And so the happiness that we get for a little bit, we'll find doesn't last very long in that sense. That we're still going to be subject to fears, worries, concerns, a little bit of stress, possibly some anxiety at times. And so that happiness can vanish pretty quickly as we're focused on some other concern, worry. And then again, that's rising out of a desire, right? To be happy and to be okay again. So those emotions, you'll notice, won't last very long, right? They'll come and they'll go. But we can, and this is, I think, to your point, develop a greater degree of sustainable, genuine sense of well-being and happiness. And that level rises over time, the stability rises over time. The more and then that's the causes of happiness, virtuous activity, doing the things we feel good about. You'll notice that even if you're getting agitated or a little stressed, it doesn't have the edge like before. There's a sense of, it's okay. It's just some stress, some things. But, it's not the end of the world. We're not that caught up in it. And there's a greater degree of stability of well-being, even as some of the worries, fears, or concerns show up. And so that becomes more and more stable and more a part of how you are. So like, for example, now, a few years later, right, you probably find that you are more content more often, less affected by things that used to affect you, right? Is that a correct assumption, Larry?
Sometimes feels like I have to look for something to be upset about. It seems like it's going along too easy. And if I listen to the practice and listen to what they say, it's like, I know you still got some work to do. So I'm doing more work.
You don't have to look too hard to find. Yeah, enjoy the contentment while you got it. That's good. As years ago, I was in therapy. I know I probably still need it, but anyway, years ago, and uh, I'd have this big breakthrough, and things are good, and therapists would go, "You know what you do with that?" I go, "No, what?" You go, "You enjoy it." Never occurred to me. Just enjoy it. Don't have to do anything else. You're good. You're good. And so, yeah, enjoy the contentment. You've earned it. It comes as a result of the practice. And I know you are a dedicated practitioner, and you've been doing this for some time, and that stability comes. And we don't have to look. We can enjoy and cultivate contentment is a practice. On its own, without you looking, you will still have moments in your life of frustration, agitation. These things will happen on their own. You don't need to dig for them. They'll show up. But the whole point is that you can make that more regular. You can be more content, even most of the time. You can have a sense of that the majority of the time, which is really nice. But as long as we're caught up in samsara, as long as we're caught up in a sense of self as independent, separate from, and our happiness dependent on certain things going a certain way, yeah, we're going to have those afflictions. It's going to happen. But at some point, you can get beyond that. Any other thoughts there? I can only see like 6 people on the screen, so if you're I will make a commitment to post that meditation. Let's take a look then at the next step here. The extensive version, a more elaborate way to meditate on the topic of equalizing oneself and others, taught by John Rinpoche. That's His Holiness's tutor. Involves contemplating 9 points. Contemplate as many of these as you have time for in each session. So the first 3 points contain reasons related to others. So first one. Every being has the same wish to be happy and free from suffering. So is it right to discriminate among them and wish only some of them to be happy and pain-free, but not others? That's a good reflection right there. If everyone wants to be happy, is it right? And where is it where we start making those judgments? If you were volunteering in a food bank and there were 10 hungry people standing in front of you, would it be right to give food only to some of them and not to others? So I really want to bring it right into how we value some and don't value others. Imagine you are a doctor with 10 people in your waiting room who are all suffering from the flu. Would it be right to take care of some of them and not the others? The next 3 points contain reasons related to oneself. Since everything we have and enjoy our food, I'm going on a tangent here. Let's try it again. Since everything we have and enjoy, our body, food, clothing, car, house, knowledge, skills, and so on, comes from others, is it right to ignore them and focus only on your own happiness? As we saw in the meditations on kindness in others, we've received immeasurable kindness from every being and will continue to receive it in the future until we are enlightened. Considering this, shouldn't we feel grateful and try to repay their kindness? I think, we tapped on this at a retreat on Sunday. And that is, we're kind of tapping into self, how we exist, how we identify. Who's John? For example, in my case. And is there anything independent, right? So you go through and you start to find there's nothing independent about me. I didn't create my body. I didn't create my thoughts. Everything was taught to me, my language, my words, everything I experienced is through the lens of conditioning. And we're in a building, other people have built, and other people, provided the wood, lumber, nails, and, the streets to transport them on. You start to recognize there's nothing, about our lives at all. It's independent. And even our thoughts come from the words and things we've learned and the things that, it's all interdependent. There's nothing independent. And we exist in dependence upon all these other conditions and people. And people who paid taxes, for those of you who had public education, that got an education, and people who built the schools, and there's private education. The people had to have jobs, and the economy and so forth. Our parents and the people who were clients of our parents, and then it just goes on and on. That every single aspect of ourselves is because of countless others, most of whom we'll never know, meet, and some of them living centuries ago, created who we are. And then we start to realize, well, the people I don't like are responsible for the life I get. And that's a radical shift, because a lot of times we think the people I don't like are the cause for me being unhappy. But they're also giving us life. They may even pay taxes to help us in some way, or grocery stores, the economy, and go to the same restaurants so we can go to those restaurants. And then we start to, at some point, if we go down that, you might get a realization that you are simply a manifestation that has arisen due to countless others and the conditions that give rise to you. And you're a part of this unfolding, not independent from it. And that's a very different realization. And so a lot of the people that created conditions for who we are and how we exist are people you would not want to have dinner with. And we start, wow, till we start to recognize, wow, just like me, they have suffering, just like me. They had different environments they grew up in than I did. So have different views. They've had different struggles than I've had. They've had different ways of being shown love or not being shown love than I had. But underneath it, they're trying to be okay like me. And then we're all very interdependent. And we exist in dependence upon these efforts, and that people that we struggle with are actually buying the groceries and supporting the environment that I get to buy groceries from, schools I get to learn from, and roads I get to drive on. A lot of people built those. I may not think of as people I'd want to hang out with, but they give us life. And so taking a point to really recognize how every aspect of our being is because of these others, and that we're literally a manifestation of all those efforts, along with what we add to it. We flavor it up a little bit. And it's, very different space to come from. And then, she's making the point, we might object thinking, but they've also harmed me. This is true. We have been harmed by others in this life and past lives. And we have also harmed them Yeah, that too. But their kindness outweighs the harm they have done. Most interactions between people and other beings on this planet are friendly, or at least non-harmful. Violence and harm exist, of course, but they are not, I'm sorry, putting my own words in there again. Violence and harm exist, of course, but they are the exception rather than the norm. And since our aim is to cultivate positive states of mind and eventually attain enlightenment for the benefit of all beings, it's more productive to focus on their kindness. I want to debate that. I'm watching my mind. In mind training, it's often pointed out that some of the harm that's been done to us, those people have helped us more. They've given us strength, resiliency. They show us our minds. And so it is good to think about their kindness, think how they give us life. But also, when we are harmed, those opportunities for growth can be significantly more beneficial. I mean, when we think about our lives, you may explore and recognize that your biggest realizations, greatest moments of growth and opportunity have come from difficult events. And often when things are just good and wonderful, we don't grow very much. It's kind of coast. But when difficulty happens and we dig in, what's life about? What's going on? You know, it's those times that we have the adversity that really motivates us to do some of the inner work. So sometimes it's really helpful to recognize the value and the harm as well. Waiting for my little pop-ups to go away here. Since we may make through me, we're at 6. Yeah, we're just. Since we are all impermanent and subject to death, is there any point in discriminating against anyone or clinging to old resentments? Imagine yourself in an airplane that encounters strong turbulence and you worry that it might crash. Would it make sense to pick fights with your fellow passengers over small things or fret about the person who didn't pay you back the $10 they borrowed? What state of mind would be most desirable and constructive at the point of death, animosity or altruism? So the big analogy is, you know, we're all going to die. Kind of a spoiler alert. The actual cause for our death is our birth. And, you know, we're all in this journey. And when you die, do you want to have a state of mind that feels connected, that has engaged in life without resentments, you know? And then understanding that resentments that we have, frustrations, you know, about people and things that we haven't forgiven, that's just wounds we're carrying. You know, somebody harmed you once, but if I carry the resentment, I'm harming myself for the next 10 years. Instead of just, yeah, that was wrong. They harmed me. How do we grow? And then the gift of forgiveness lets me stop suffering. I let go of that. I deserve to not carry resentment. I deserve to not carry that pain anymore. Instead of me continually carrying it with me year after year after year. It doesn't breed justice. It just robs us of our opportunity to live now in a way that's healthy. So that's the analogy there, is that we're all on this journey and this big plane of life. Doesn't mean you don't stick up for yourself. Just means you don't carry that. After the harm's been done, don't carry it with you again. The above 6 reasons are the point of view of conventional truth, our everyday world of people, things, and events. The last 3 are from the viewpoint of ultimate truth, how things are empty of inherent existence. So this should be pretty quick. There are no inherently existing friends or enemies, no one who is a friend or enemy from their own side. If there were, the Buddhas would perceive them as such, but they see no one as an enemy. Buddhas love everyone equally, just as a mother loves all her children. Okay. And so, simple way to get to that. Friends, enemies, people we like, people we don't like, strangers. These are labels we attach to people based on how we view them subjectively in our experience with them. And we may notice that there are friends that we have that become people we don't like anymore. People we don't like can sometimes become friends. We kind of find out some things about them. But we notice that the inherent quality or label that we put on someone as a friend or as someone I don't like or is always a subjective label that we're putting on someone based on this very limited view we know about them. I often think about like Robert Redford. I have a view that he's a great guy and I think he'd be amazing. Now, I've never met him. I have no idea. I've read some stuff about him. I heard some good things, like his movies. But I don't really know Robert Redford. It's a whole characterization in my mind, and even the roles he played or things he's acted, we've never hung out. Likewise, with people that we know all the time, how much do you really know about anyone you've ever met, and even someone you don't like, what their struggles were, what they've been through, hardships they have that you might think very differently about them. And so it's empty in how they don't exist. They don't exist in the label we put on them. There's a much greater bandwidth of them than me pinpoint. How would you like to be judged for one thing you did? And that's who you are. We've done a lot of things and we're changing. And then how we're perceiving someone will change too based on what we're attending to about them. So the empty nature and how they do not exist, they don't exist as the label we're pinning on them. There's much more to them and there's much more about them. And so that's how they don't exist. It's not that they're not real. It's they don't exist in the way I'm perceiving them. Ultimately. Makes sense? That was easier than I thought. Kimberly.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for leading this every weekend many times. I ladies.
What's your dog's name?
You said that Bodhi.
Bodhi.
I
So
renamed him.
yeah,
Short for
okay.
Bodhisattva.
All right. Bodhi has something to share. Good.
You said the plane of life, and at that right before then, a picture. Often pictures come in my mind. I guess I'm trying to see it so I can understand it better. But I was a picture of a giant quilt, and all of us are a piece of that quilt. We don't have any choice about it. And we're all interdependent to be able to exist and move. And I was going to say, like, is it sort of like that?
A lot of people use an analogy like that, the fabric of life that weaves us together, kind of a thing. It's a good
But there's
indigenous.
no choices in that.
Right. So it does seem more stagnant, right, is the way you're kind of sharing. But what works about it is if one fabric on the weave gets moved, it affects you. And what you do affects others. And there's an interdependence there. So that metaphor works in that way quite nicely.
And the fabric is always moving. And
Yeah.
we're all moving together.
Yeah.
Sure came to mind when you were talking.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. Lots of different metaphors people use around interdependence and interconnection. And the key thing now is remember, yeah, we are existent because of all these others. They exist interdependently. But how we perceive and experience people and others is always this subjective experience that's always based upon our conditioning. And other people see the very same thing differently. Laura got to see some reindeer today. Yeah, like reindeer. Yeah, they brought reindeer down to the library.
Even the baby.
You know, baby, what was the baby's name? Willow. Yeah, Willow, little baby reindeer. And imagine a little kid seeing reindeer. Wow, it's pretty cool. So, but they're all seeing different reindeers from their own experience and what you know about that. And I just wanted to find a way to work the reindeer into this. Finally, yeah. I just thought it was cool. So, all right, let's. I think we're gonna get through all these. Let's. Let me find the right button. Share. Okay, there we go. Oop, I hit the wrong one. It's all very exciting at this point. I feel like I'm playing the lotto or something. Okay. So I think that's a good way of understanding this. You know, there are no friends, enemies. Those are labels, right? They're constructs in our minds, how we're perceiving someone in a moment. It's not really how they exist. If they were permanent, inherently existent friends, enemies, and strangers, they would be like that forever and would never change. But people do change and relationships change. A friend can become an enemy and an enemy can become a friend and a stranger can become either. This happens from one life to another and even within one life due to changes in circumstances and in the ways our mind perceives and labels people. So I guess I got ahead of that. That's, yeah. And 9. Clinging to permanent, inherently existing friends and enemies is like having fixed ideas of this side and that side. For example, when we're standing on one side of a road, we refer to it as this side and call the opposite side that side. But when we cross the road, that side becomes this side, and this side becomes that side. Such labels depend on our perspective from where we stand. The same happens with people. Someone who has similar political views as oneself is on this side, but a person who has opposing views is on that side. These labels are not fixed and permanent because any of us might change our views at any time. Similarly, we label I in relation to our own body and mind and label others in relation to other sets of body and mind. But from their point of view, their body-mind complex is I, and our body-mind complex is other. Therefore, I and other, as well as friend, enemy, and stranger, are just labels that depend on shifting circumstances and concepts. They do not exist from their own side inherently, meaning they're not independent and unchangeable. Everything's changing, right? Our perspective changes, the labels change. And so, there's not this independent, fixed person that is this way or that way. And even we change. I mean, you're not the person you were 10 years ago, right? 10 years easier to recognize than you're not who you were yesterday. And you're always becoming. And that's to really kind of drive this home in a minute, is we can forget we're in a moment of anger, that moment of anger will come and go and you probably won't even remember it. I mean, how many times have you been enraged in your life? Probably at least 3, right? And, is there any way that you could remember all the times you were enraged at someone in your life? You can't remember that. That moment's come and gone. It's temporary, it's impermanent, and your life has moved on. But in that moment, it's huge. It is huge, right? So by engaging in these practices, we start to realize that those feelings and how we think things are just so like this, and that ruined everything about my whatever, or we can't remember that a year later. And then sometimes we remember stuff, we don't always remember it correctly. And so working with this, we start to understand that everyone that we're engaged with in this world, is just like me, trying to do things. But what I'm angry at, a person that I'm angry at, a lot of that has to do with my label in my mind about how I perceive them to be, as though that's who they are, instead of how I'm perceiving them in this moment of what they're doing that's unhealthy or harmful. And that's a thing that they're doing, but not who they are. And they may be able to do different things. Or even if I pay attention to something else about them, I might experience them differently. Let's see if we can get the conclusion. Oh, okay, there's a question. There's a question. Was there a question? The hand come down. If there is, speak up. Okay, they're like, nah.
I have a question.
All right.
Okay. Hi, I'm Victoria, and it's my first time
Hi,
here.
Victoria.
Thank you. And I've attended a couple of sessions at the Durango Dharma Center, but I
Oh.
actually live much closer to you all and discovered you recently. And I have not been a practicing Buddhist, but I'm interested, and I have been in Recovery Dharma, actively working that recovery program for more than 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to tie in what you had said earlier with later what you said about forgiveness. I was at a Recovery Dharma meeting recently, and I talked about my own experience of forgiveness and how many times it seems that people, and sometimes some of the literature I've read, just think you just have to be willing to forgive and you will forgive. And I talked about some issues being extraordinarily difficult, or like that I had done a resentment inventory, for instance, and thought I had forgiven the person completely, only to find 2 years later that no, there was still more resentment and that I had to uncover what the underlying issue was. So this is really about my parents, not just anyone. And some gentleman in the meeting piped up and said, well, really, it's people who don't forgive because they're attached to suffering. And I have to say that I felt a little bit insulted. I felt like he didn't hear or give any credence to what I said. And I was trying to think of him like what you were talking about, which I find very useful, just like me. Like he wants to find happiness and not suffering. But part of me also thought, wow, I think he's causing harm to this group of more than 20 people because so many of them are so new to recovery. And he and I have a lot more time, respectively, sober. And so I was like struggling, like feeling like he was trying to put himself as a teacher and talking intellectually and causing harm. And so I found myself really trying not to be resentful, but feeling very disconcerted and conflicted about it. And then when you were talking tonight about looking at other people as just like us, I was like, yeah, that's what I did. But that did not help me because I was too upset in the moment on the basis of the harm that I thought was being caused. Plus, to be completely honest, maybe at a subconscious level, I felt a bit angry that he was challenging my sharing of my experience in what I considered to be a disrespectful way. And then you talked about forgiveness after in the second part. And I just wondered what your thoughts were about all of this and my continuing struggle.
Yeah,
And
thanks, Victoria. It's good to have you here.
thank you.
Glad you laid out a very simple question. Yeah, but it's very clear, and I really appreciate that. The recognition that it's so important when we're in a group of people to be thoughtful about what it is that we're trying to share and how we can be helpful. And sometimes our words, whatever the motivation is, trying to give advice or, we don't know what their real intention is, as you mentioned, potentially want to show their knowledge or be a teacher or these things that so important in communication, that we're coming from a place of care and concern, and that blanket statements, things that we believe to be true, as this is how things are, can cause some pain. So let's just start with the idea of forgiveness. Fundamentally, it's a process, and that's what you were sharing, and that was so clear that forgiving is not an attitude. It's not something I decide to do and it's done, right? Forgiveness is a process going through what we've just been talking about, recognizing the first and foremost, the harm that was done and what's a healthy way to heal from it. And that's how we forgive. And that can be a process. One of the things that I find helpful is when I recognize someone who has done harm to me, is I've come to understand that they've harmed themselves much more than me. And I've got huge stories and evidence around that. And people, when we do things we don't feel good about, we're creating karmic imprints, we're creating a sense of, not feeling good about who we are, and we're imprisoning our mind as we engage in harm. And so, as people have, for all just like me, and everyone's got the disease of samsara, everyone has their afflictions, everyone is trying to find their way. Just because someone has a greater symptom of the disease than I do, that softens the way I understand that their behavior is a reflection of their disease. And it's not personal anymore. It's not about me. It's about them and their disease, and what are the healing aspects that I can engage in, because I deserve to be well. And activities that have harmed me provide opportunities to heal, to become more resilient, to become stronger, and the ability to eventually see that person as having been helpful to me. it's all nice in words, but it's a process to realize that. And I would say it has nothing to do with being attached to suffering. Our attachment is to being happy. It's just the opposite. And out of our desire to be happy, and insecurities around our lives, we do a lot of things that maybe are not so healthy and a lot of things that are healthy. So we come back to the start of that, just like me. And so in that opportunity, there's a real clarity that we have, is that this act of forgiveness is one of the most compassionate things we can do for ourselves. Because when we forgive, when we're able to actually have a realization of forgiveness, we give ourselves permission to stop suffering, to heal. We don't have to carry it with us anymore. There's no inner emotional affliction anymore. But to get rid of that affliction requires a process, not a 2-minute talk in a self-help group, right? Or, a quote on on your refrigerator. It's really a journey. And so it sounds like you've done a great job at being a participant in that journey. And so having that wisdom, we also then realize that other people have their own ways of being in the world, their own views and beliefs, and from their perspective, share things that they think are helpful. I do find it helpful to not try to read their minds and their motives. I've really come to realize I'm not very good at reading people's minds. To me, it can be so clear they're doing it because, whatever. But rather just work with the action itself. And so over time, we can get more skillful at how we engage with actions that, whether it's words that are being said or, that, what would be the healthiest way to respond or engage with what's being said for the group and for yourself and for the person. And so that becomes not so much being, all the labels we put, but what's the healthy way to engage with what has been said rather than why it was said. Does that make sense there?
Yes, thank you. Very helpful.
Yeah. I also thought it was very reflective on your part to recognize, there's some part of ourself in that. And that's where it shows my mind, when I start noticing myself, how I am evaluating, I kind of see my own stuff. So yeah, very skillful, I thought. Okay. Thanks for sharing. And let me just see if we get the conclusion, then that would be a good wrap up here. Pop-ups. There we go. Conclusion. If you experience a sense of the equality between yourself and others, even to a slight degree, focus on it single-pointedly for as long as possible without thinking of other things. Then resolve to keep this in mind as you go about your daily activities when you see and interact with others. These people want happiness and do not want suffering just as much as I do. All right, and then we dedicate. I guess one last thing I want to say on that previous one is I'm pretty sure I've said things at meetings that I regret saying, thinking I knew something too. That's probably helpful to remember. I've gone through various stages of my journey in meetings. Okay. let us dedicate the merit and wisdom of our time together. A lot of things we could have been doing on Wednesday night, though. Wow, Christmas is next week. Is anybody aware of that? Snuck up on me. A lot of things we could have done, and here we are, cultivating our hearts and minds, reflecting on methods of compassion for ourselves and others, and ways that we can be of benefit. Great deal of merit there, and a great deal of opportunity to improve ourselves and the world we live in, to cultivate a greater understanding of ourselves and our capacity. Bodhisattvas. So let us dedicate any and all merit that we have accumulated here today and throughout our lives for the benefit of others. May our efforts find their way into the world, relieving others of their suffering and helping them find freedom. And may we also dedicate this for our own continued spiritual growth, that we may ultimately recognize our own Buddha nature and be of greatest benefit to all. And with this in mind, those who'd care to can join me in our dedication. By this merit may I soon attain the enlightened state of Guru Buddha, that I may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare